I had no savings either. And I remember telling a mentor of mine, I'm like, oh, there's a fair bit I want to do this thing, but
This is happiness, to be everything at once. Be unblinded, be unlearned, be unbridled and unburned.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to a brand new episode of Mood Prep. My name is Dave Nixon, and I'm going to do something a little bit different today. Is this loud enough? No, we're good. After 500 and something episodes, I'm actually going to do some storytelling. I've definitely done storytelling, but my experience storytelling. So I was 26, and I remember actually New Year's Day, waking up New Year's morning of 2015. New Year's Day is my birthday. I remember waking up and I was fucking like, I hated my life. Hated it. The two businesses that I was operating at that time kind of had some issues pop up. My income dropped significantly. There was lots of things I was well in over my head. And at that point, I was actually house sitting over that period. And there was a number of things now that I look back at happened and shifted for me. I think about 3 months later, I actually started house sitting, and I house sat for 3 years. Maybe 4 months later, I house sat for 3 years. So what a lot of people don't know about that is that although I was never houseless, I was homeless for a period of time. House sitting is a great way to save money because you're not paying money on rent or paying money on mortgage. For me, for a big chunk of those 3 years, except for right at the end, I was earning well below minimum wage. There was a lot of other difficulties with it, but I did it because I couldn't afford to pay rent. I remember sleeping in the gym. I remember sleeping in my car. I remember sleeping at friends' places that were like, hey man, if you ever need anything, let me know. I learnt that 2, max 3 nights was the limit. You could stay anywhere. I could stay anywhere without them being like, yeah, it's time for you to fucking sort something out. Girls are coming around or something. Anyway, I had a lot of help during that period. And that was the year that I decided that I wanted to go to America. I wanted to go to America and train with a bunch of people that I looked up to when I was growing up in the industry. Keep in mind, I started working in the industry when I was 15. Started training people off a traineeship when I was 16. Managed that gym when I was 18. Managed 3 gyms when I was 19. Left there when I was 21. Started my own gym with myself and 6 clients when I was 22. And that was my process out of there. And then here we are today. Lots of lessons later. And so there was a lot of influences that I had. And it's smoky. Lagavulin 8. It's nice. It is nice. So, by the time my garage style gym came around, CrossFit was pretty big. And most people just figured that I owned a CrossFit gym, but didn't want to pay the affiliate fees. It was basically a CrossFit gym. And funnily enough, the people that did say that were often the people that never trained with me or spent much time with me. I like CrossFit. This year I actually went to the CrossFit Games. I went to CrossFit Games as a spectator 3 years in a row in California. I really enjoyed it. So, you know, like it's not like I didn't like it. It was just it wasn't my introduction to functional training. It wasn't my introduction to that style of training. It became an influence, and it still is an influence today. But there are many other things out there that people could use to integrate all of those models as opposed to just one or just the other or so forth. And so this year I wanted to go across to America. Keep in mind I had no fucking money. I wanted to go across to America and go and train with these people that I looked up to for a long period of time. And I had no savings either. And I remember telling a mentor of mine, I'm like, oh, there's a fair bit I want to do this thing, but there's a fair bit of resistance from the business partners. And he's like, so? And I was like, oh, well, it just makes it hard to figure out what to do. He's like, mate, there's always going to be resistance. You just have to do the things you want to do. He made it pretty simple. Like, his next question after that was like, how's the eggs? Because we're at breakfast, right? It's just like, dude, you just got to figure out what it is you want to do. And it's important to go. It can take into consideration other people, but they got to take into consideration you for you doing what you want to do. Anyway, so fast forward at about maybe a month and a half, and I already had emailed everyone that I wanted to go over and see. And so the first year I went and spent time with a guy called Chris Spieler at CrossFit Park City. This is all the people that I had organised and touched base with. Robert McDonald, or Bobby Maximus, he was at Jim Jones at the time. That was my original influence on functional training. Chris Duffin from Portland, Oregon, up at Kabuki Strength. CT Fletcher, the CrossFit Games. I went to Westside Barbell, and also went and saw my man Jay Marinake, over in New York. And so about 8 to 6 weeks before going, I still had no money. I don't know how I was going to go, and I managed to sell a $6,000 online product. It was just happened to fall into my lap. In fact, the way that happened is that I was a groomsman at a wedding earlier that year in January, and I saw the mother of the person who bought that product. And I hadn't seen him in 7 years or something, maybe a bit less, maybe 6 years. And we haven't spoken in that long, and then that's what ended up happening. So that product that I sold was actually gave me enough funds to book my tickets. I had a ticket to go to Park City, and I booked 2 nights accommodation, did I? Three nights accommodation, Park City, Utah, and I had booked a ticket home from New York a month later. And so all this came to plan, and I remember getting myself to Sydney. I remember getting myself to the airport and checking in and everything happening. And then I've been overseas before. I've been to Thailand and Europe with friends. And then I remember sitting on the plane, and we're just about to take off, and we're sort of on the runway, and I just fucking hit me. I'm like, what the fuck am I doing? I had 2,000 Australian dollars in my pocket for a month in America, with 3 nights accommodation booked. And what followed was nothing short of pretty epic in many different ways. I actually have a full text of this written out. I just got to edit it. I did it years and years ago, but it's just been sitting there, a manuscript. So I was on this plane. I had 2,000 Australian dollars, left the gym and everything else behind. And I got to, I landed in Salt Lake City and got off the plane. It was night time, and I got a bus or a taxi, I think. A taxi to the hotel that I stayed at that night near the airport, because I was going to Park City, about 40 minutes away, the next day, where Chris Spieler was. And so that was really funny. I remember my first conversation with a taxi driver. It was she was an African lady, African American, and she was driving. And I said, "What's the process with tipping?" And she goes, "Well, you're in a Mormon state." And I'm like, "Yeah." And she goes, "Yeah." And I'm like, "Okay." And she goes, "Yeah." That was literally like one of my first conversations with an American. And I'm like, I have no fucking idea what that means. I'm like, do I tip more? Do I not tip? Is it offensive to tip? I never tipped her either. I was just like, when I got out and ran into the hotel. I quite remember that. It's quite funny. So the funny thing was, the next day was when I went and got a car, and it was like basically a Toyota Corolla. It was a Chevy something. And it literally, they saw me coming. I didn't know my insurance covered everything, and I think I spent $1,200 of my $2,000 Australian on a car for 6 nights. And I was so fucking disorientated. I was jet lagged. I was driving on the other side of the road. The GPS wasn't working. And then what also happened was, like, I was in Salt Lake City, and I'm like, I have no fucking idea what I'm doing. I just spent I have $800 to last me until maybe when my tax comes through, or I can sell something online. And I just remember feeling absolutely defeated. How long we got?
Yeah, 10 minutes.
10 minutes. All right. I'll finish this part and I'll tell you the rest tomorrow. And I remember I actually broke my flip-flops, my thongs, right? But I could push it back in enough so that I just had to drag my foot. If I picked my foot up, it would fall out. And I know not to call thongs in America. They're called flip-flops. In Australia, we call them thongs, right? Jandals in New Zealand. And so I'm fucking jet-lagged or disoriented. I just spent like $1,200 of my $2,000. And I was just so disorientated. And I just this fucking shitty car. And I get to the wealthiest Mormon built mall in all of Salt Lake City, Utah. And I'm like limping around the complex trying to find somewhere that I mean, a surf shop. There's not gonna be a surf shop in Utah. I didn't know that. And trying to find somewhere to buy thongs. And I finally, after going past like Burberry, Mont Blanc, like the Porsche concept store, all that kind of stuff, I go into like a surf, dive, ski or similar. Wouldn't be surf or dive. I guess it was just ski. And I go in there and I was like, hey, do you guys have any thongs? And the guy just fucking looked at me. I spoke a different language, right? And I just looked at him and I was like, he's like, sandals? He showed me these Jesus sandals and I'm like, not in Utah, buddy. Anyway, I ended up finding some thongs from Cotton On, and the guy was like, you from Australia? That's awesome. It wasn't that day. And I basically like crawl back to where I was staying that night in Park City, 40 minutes away. And I was so exhausted. My nervous system, like I had never exhausted my nervous system ever. Not in like a weekend of like serious training, like in football camps, nothing like I did when I was first in America for the first time ever, driving on the other fucking side of the road, knowing I had $800 until maybe when the next bit of money comes in. And I'd never used an Airbnb before, and I stayed at this Airbnb. I'll finish the story of the Airbnb and then we can go on to the fun stuff. But I was fucking exhausted. Also, I was jet lagged. I didn't know I was jet lagged. I'd never been jet lagged before. Even though I've been to Europe and that, I was never jet lagged. Oh man, I was all by myself. I probably cried. I can't remember, but I probably cried. Anyway, so I go to this Airbnb and stay there for the first night. The next day, I went to CrossFit Park City, Chris Beeler's gym. And so, actually, I'll explain all of Chris Beeler and his gym to you in the next episode. A little series. I like it. So, until tomorrow, when you find out more, peace and pizza, kick today in the dick, and slay the dragon. I'll see you soon.